monarchy high up in the Himalayas. It's sort of sandwiched between India and China. And as I hiked up and up to a monastery, I could hear the monks chanting and singing in the distance. Prayer flags whipped in the wind, and the giant mountains hovered, and it was all so otherworldly and exotic. It also happened to be my 40th birthday. I kept thinking 40. Wow, 40. I always thought that by this age I'd be married and have kids, maybe even grown kids. I could almost hear God laughing in the wind at how differently everything turned out for me. Ahead of me on the trail was this old man carrying a prayer wheel and one of those rosaries of prayer beads that has the same number of beads that Catholics use, a mala, I think it's called. And I thought, wow, see, it looks like he could almost be my grandmother walking to church. I got closer to the monastery, but as I got closer, I could see how young some of the monks were. It's a tradition in places like Tibet and Bhutan that the second son just automatically goes into the monastery. Some of the boys are as young as 7, the age of reason, but hardly an age where someone can make an informed decision about their life purpose. I mean, they would only get a religious education. They would never get to experience, well, a heterosexual relationship with its particular joys and sorrows, or a family of their own. Instead of being inspired by them, I wanted to free them. And as I hiked back down, I thought, maybe I have it backwards. Maybe we don't all worship the same God. I mean, after all, the Buddhist gods are so different than the Judeo-Christian God, but we all sure seem to worship them in the same ways. We recite prayers, we make sacrifices, we wear special garments, we use special objects. From there, I went to Thailand, where I happened to talk to this woman who was taking care of a terribly deformed boy who was an orphan. And I said, it's so good of you to take care of this poor boy. And she said, don't say poor boy. He must have done something terrible in a past life to be born like that. When I got back to Los Angeles, even though there was still a lot about Buddhism that truly did intrigue me, I had to admit I was less interested. I kept thinking, wow, the Buddhism we get in California is all cleaned up for us. And I wondered what enlightenment really meant. I felt pretty good about my levels of attachment and detachment to the world. To me, life was not all suffering. In fact, what I mostly felt was this growing sense of outrageous luck. And I realized that I wasn't just looking for inner peace so that I could feel happier or more content with my own life. I was trying to figure out why I was born, who God was, and I guess what the ultimate meaning of life was. Well, Bill Moyers was to appear once again on my quest, not exactly as a spiritual guide showing me down the right road, but more like a friendly gas station attendant who has some pretty good maps for sale next to the cash register. He did this interview with Sister Wendy. Do you know Sister Wendy? She is that nun who is on PBS all the time, walking through museums, talking rapturously about art. I love Sister Wendy. To me, she has the perfect dream life. Half the year she spends in a silent monastery, and the other half she spends being a television star. I've watched all of her videos, and Bill Moyers did this special interview with her. He did ask her question after question after question about her sexless existence, which got to be rather annoying and then even a little disturbing. But at one point he said to her, Sister Wendy, when you're at the monastery, what do you do all day? And Sister Wendy said, well, Bill, I pray a lot, and I live in the sunshine of God's presence. It's absolute bliss. And I thought, the sunshine of God's presence, huh? The sunshine of God's presence. Maybe I'll spend more time in the sunshine. Maybe for me, God is nature, the beauty and harmony of our natural world. And as soon as I said it, it felt so right. I could almost hear God saying, duh. And I walked around saying, God is nature. God is nature. That's the way for me to connect with God, by spending time in his masterpiece, nature. Now, you know, Catholics don't push nature all that much either. I think there's something almost pornographic about the whole idea of nature to Catholics. I don't remember a lot of hiking growing up. We weren't like those crazy Protestants who were out camping all the time. I guess the idea was that nature was just so lush and unabashedly ripe, you just didn't know what you were going to get tangled up in out in nature. So I decided that I would try to experience God while I was on a hike or on a bike. And it was fun. It was really fun. And I began to notice the smallest leaves and what a web of life there was out there, so intricate and beautiful. I was able to continue my travels, and this time I headed to South America, and I went to Ecuador and then went to visit the Galapagos Islands. I went on a week-long boat trip with a naturalist and 8 other people. And in the common area of the boat was Charles Darwin's The Origin of Species. And I laughed when I saw it because I thought, either you would be someone who would have already read The Origin of Species, and that would be why you even came here to the Galapagos, or you would be someone who would probably never read The Origin of Species. I mean, how supremely dorky would it be if someone saw this book here and thought, I wonder what this is about, and started reading it here, of all places? That would be so ridiculous. And in a few moments, I basically was that person. Now, of course, I accepted the theory of evolution. I mean, I remembered Sister Charitina telling us all about it in 8th grade, how we, as Catholics, believe in evolution. We weren't like some of those uneducated Protestants that believe God literally plopped people onto the earth in one fell swoop. She said, this is the way it happened. God set everything in motion in order for humans to evolve. Then there was a special preordained moment when there was the very, very first human man and woman. Because think about it. There had to be some moment when there was the very, very first human man and woman, and that was Adam and Eve. And that's when God put a soul in us. And then everything else happened exactly as it says in the Bible. And then she sort of encouraged us not to think so much about evolution anymore, because after all, she had just explained it. Right? In any case, the idea of evolution wasn't threatening to me in any way. It's just, I didn't really understand that much about it, except over time, animals change. I thought The Origin of Species would be way too scientific of a book for a person like me to read. Personally, I had avoided science at all costs in school. In fact, I even had this prejudice, this idea that doing well at science was somehow an admission that you didn't have the complexity of character or the subtlety of mind to take on the humanities. Science was for people who couldn't handle ambiguities, who needed black and white answers, probably people who couldn't really get in touch with their feelings and had nothing left to think about. But to my surprise, The Origin of Species was very easy to read and truly a page-turner. And Charles Darwin, he described evolution in ways that Sister Charitina had not. It was a lot more scary and chancy the way Darwin described it. The next day, we visited an island where the blue-footed boobies were tending to their new babies. Now, the blue-footed boobies are just the cutest animals in the world, I think almost to the level of absurdity. They have this bright white fur that sticks out all over, and these big blue beaks and feet, and these huge plaintive eyes. Now, usually the blue-footed boobies have just one baby per pregnancy, but every once in a while they have 2, and when they do, usually the stronger of the 2 pecks the brains out of the weaker one. So we were all looking at these adorable little blue-footed booby babies. And then we came upon one pecking the brains out of its weaker sibling. And the naturalist was telling us that this was routine, that now the frigate bird would fly in soon and carry the dead baby off to feed its family. That's the way it went. And I looked at this poor, doomed, blue-footed booby baby with his brains just hanging out of his head. And we looked each other in the eye for a moment. And he looked at me like, what are you gonna do? I'm the weaker blue-footed booby baby. Oh, God. God is not nature. God is not nature. Nature is floods and famines and earthquakes and viruses and little blue-footed booby babies getting their brains pecked out by their stronger sibling. God, the God that I know, the God of love and compassion, that isn't exactly found in nature. We went back to the boat, and clouds formed overhead, and I decided I would just lie in the fetal position for a while and consider nature. So God and nature are separate. Oh, it is so obvious that that is true. I mean, God is a moral force, and nature is utterly amoral. I mean, nature doesn't care about me or anybody in particular. I mean, nature can be terrifying. Gosh, why do they even put words like natural on products like shampoo? Like, that's automatically a good thing. I mean, sulfuric acid is natural. I could almost hear God saying, duh. But then, God, who are you? Because I can't stop thinking,